Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Now, even though it's been a tough week for many of you returning to the daily grind, remember that it's never been easier to go out there and do your own thing. I say easy, I should probably say that there are more opportunities. And even if you don't have the cash to turn that dream into a reality, you can turn to crowdfunding platforms such as Kickstarter and Indiegogo. And if you're searching for a bit of inspiration, today's guest should give you just that, because he was behind quite an achievement in being the most crowdfunded edtech project in Kickstarter's history, with a phenomenal 2.4 million raised from over 10,000 backers. And their project was about finding a solution to teach children how to code, but without screens. Essentially, they've created a toy called Cubetto, which many believe will help foster the next generation of digital groundbreakers. Now, what I love about this product is it doesn't matter if you have no technology, no Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or even a screen, but it enables kids to master the art of coding. I think it's a fantastic story, and it's great to get them on the show today. So buckle up, hold on tight, because I want to beam your ears all the way to London here in the UK, so we can speak with Primo Toys co-founder Filippo Jacob, who's going to share his inspirational edtech startup story. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to speak with you. My name is Filippo Jacob, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Primo. And what our company does is that it creates STEM technologies for kids. So the goal of our business is to introduce children in early years, ages 3 to 6, to 21st century skills like computer programming, robotics, data analytics, without using screens and in a child-friendly way. So we leverage connected technologies to make really interesting STEM toys that prepare your children for the future.
But now, most people listening will be no stranger to Kickstarter campaigns, but nothing like what you guys have achieved. So I want to take you back to 2016 when Cubetto became a record-breaking $6 million Kickstarter campaign, becoming the most funded edtech brand in Kickstarter history. My understanding is that Cubetto is a coding toy famous for introducing computer programming to children's ages of 3 and up, like you said a few moments ago, but without the use of a screen. So can you expand a little about that and the phenomenal attention that you were receiving?
So basically, early on in our journey, we kind of realized that we had this idea. We had this wake-up moment. I had this wake-up moment where I realized that children in schools today are not taught the skills that they're going to need to take part in the industries of the future. And I partnered up with a friend who also had a similar realization to create Cubetto to teach children computer programming in early years, because we believe that it was a language. It is the language of the future. It's the lingua franca of the 21st century. And as such, it should really be introduced starting in early years, the same that you do normal language or arithmetic, but there was nothing out there that kind of did that. And so when we started looking for investment for this idea, which was the germ of the concept that became Cubetto, that my co-founder Matteo so brilliantly came up with, we were just getting a lot of no's. Nobody really, first of all, it was 2013. Nobody actually believed that computer programming was going to be something important in education, let alone teaching it without a screen. And so we heard of Kickstarter as this quote-unquote magical place where you just go and all of your wild wishes come true. And we did a campaign. Actually, in 2016, we then ended up selling Cubettos through Kickstarter, as you said, raising $1.6 million. And we financed the company that way, and proved, rather than raising finance from investors, we just proved that there was a market for what we were doing. And we just realized, what a brave new world. Whereas before, you would have had to find finances, you would have had to go to a manufacturer and a distributor and convince the retailers and everybody along the value chain. We could just go to somewhere like Kickstarter and crowdfund our product and build something and distribute it directly to the people who wanted it, which were parents and teachers like us who also believed that computer programming is an important 21st century skills to be taught to children. And that kind of and that kind of set our company off as a Kickstarter first business. And then eventually we found traditional distributors, and we started moving into more mainstream distribution channels. We now have an office in Japan, we have an office in Korea, we have a manufacturing facility in China, and we sort of became a business, which last year turned over around $4.5 million in revenue, and we're growing by another 40% this year. So it all kind of came from there. And to talk about the idea, yes, this idea that computer programming should be taught in early years, should be taught in age-appropriate ways. So we took a lot of inspiration from Montessori learning principles, and it is something that people are going to want to do with their children, but also that it has to be fun, it has to be approachable, and it has to be something that kids want to do. So this is how we ended up with Cubetto and with our company and with our mission.
Now, I'd assume as well that having a record-breaking Kickstarting campaign would have completely taken you by surprise. And assuming it was a shock, did you then have the very nice problem of having to pivot and adjust your game plan to actually think bigger and on that grander scale?
Oh, wow. Well, it's kind of, you have to prepare for it. Yeah. Big campaigns don't happen by chance, but you don't expect it. Yeah. So we did all of the work. We prepped our community. We figured out how to market our campaign before it actually launched, but we definitely didn't expect to do what it did. And by that point, we actually we had built a previous version of our product, which was assembled by hand. We built the first 800 units by hand. We turned our office into a little factory. So we knew there was demand for it, and we already had some wholesale orders. So we had to gear up for big supply chain and production. But of course, when the orders came in as they did on Kickstarter, we just had to speed everything up. But luckily, that infrastructure was there. But it's just a surreal experience, actually, to just think that you can get that kind of support financially, but also from the community, from people around the world, from a Kickstarter campaign. Again, it's an amazing world that we live in, that you can do that. You couldn't do this 10 years ago. You couldn't do this 15 years ago. You can do this today with just an idea and with a product. And for us, it's actually about specialization, because we specialize in a very specific thing. My job and the job of our company, our mission, is to create technologies for early years that help them understand these 21st century skills. That helped us with the success of it, and that helped us with the communication of it. There was real purpose to what we were doing, and that kind of helped. But to be able to do this was a phenomenal experience. It was eye-opening.
Now, I think there will be many people listening to this show at various stages of their own startup journey, and first things first, they will be hoping that they can reach their target. But I'm curious, when your campaign far eclipses your expectations, what is the best advice that you would pass on to anyone that suddenly finds themselves with that very nice problem that you had there?
We delivered, and that was good. But you do have a lot of people who eclipse their targets and cannot deliver because of it. So we were prepared though. So my advice is try not to find yourself in that position. Plan ahead of time and understand what your contingency is for having a great success that you anticipate. Also have a plan B in case you don't succeed as expected. It goes both ways. I think it's about being prepared and really understanding your unit economics and how they scale. So again, we understood that. We modeled it. We prepared for it but didn't expect it. So my advice is prepare for it. You never know.
Now, many parents will understand the importance of their children learning how to code, but what I love about what you're doing now is that unique approach that teaches that important skill to the youngest ever age group in history, but without involving screen time. And I've got to ask, was removing that screen a move that you decided very, very early on? And why do you think it was so important?
Oh yeah, I mean that was the entire approach to our project from day one, not to use a screen, because you can't avoid children playing with screen devices. They're ubiquitous. They're just everywhere. My son, who's now 4, he was born with an iPad in his hands, but he uses it for entertainment. Yeah. And to then all of a sudden tell him that this project or this product that he's using needs to be used for education or something a little bit more functional, he doesn't like it. He sees it as a product that allows him to go on Netflix or YouTube and watch his favorite cartoon or kid show. So we realized that by removing the screen, we could actually allow the child to focus on the play experience that was right in front of him and what he could do with the blocks, which was to program this robot in the real world. And by removing the screen, you remove a level of abstraction from the act of learning the paradigms of programming, like the queue, writing functions, action causality, debugging, and also we could do something that was age appropriate. And one of the important things that we learned from doing a lot of research in the Montessori space is that hands-on learning, kinesthetic learning, is so important. And one of the other things that was important about removing the screen was to create an experience that was collaborative. More than one child can play around the same product. And that's extremely key, because one of the things that we measure as a business is impact. And I don't mean impact in terms of money, but I mean impact in the sense that for every Cubetto playset that's in circulation, whether it's in a home or whether it tours with an after-school coding club, an average of 50 children play and get introduced to computer programming with a Cubetto playset because it has no screen and because of the way that it's built. And so when you do the maths, we've already introduced computer programming skills to more than 1 million children around the world. And actually more, and that number is growing every day, because that's a lot of impact that we could have by creating a product that was collaborative and screenless. The other reason for removing the screen was actually to create a product that didn't age, that didn't become obsolete in the same way that other plastic robots that only work with tablets, for example, can be. The same playset you can take out in 20 years' time and you can still give to your children to play with. If there is no, with the other products that work with devices, if there's no update on an application to work with a new operating system or a new phone, your robot becomes useless. So that's what we wanted to achieve, a product that didn't really age. Removing the screen was key. The other thing that we wanted to achieve is a product that could be used anywhere. So we've had example of children playing in deserts, in jungles, and mountains, and really rural places with no connections and no tablets and no additional devices. They can just take it out and play and learn. And you can't do that with if you have a screen or if you have a product that requires Bluetooth or Wi-Fi to operate, for example. So it was designed for maximum impact, and removing the screen was essential for that.
Now, I also love how you've not just stood still on this either, because you've expanded on the multi-award-winning success of Cubetto, but also can you tell me more about how this new ecosystem that you've introduced of play maps and activity books that actually expand play and also STEM learning around your original product?
Well, I think that learning is about experience, and a great learning toy is only as good as the memories that it can create. And in order to do that, you have to enrich their experience with content, with playful content that they can understand. So the maps are themed. There are themes like jungle, space, cities, and other ecosystems of themselves that they can explore while playing. It gives them another reason to take the product out of the box and take them on an adventure. And as they go on an adventure with this robot, or numerous adventures, they learn more. So creating this ecosystem of maps and books was extremely important. And we noticed that 50% of our customers returned to buy at least one of the additional maps. And actually, the demand for these new maps has also been overwhelming in a good sense. And so we know that they work because parents need a way to play with their children, and we facilitate that. At the core of the values of the company is that we allow parents to build great relationships with their children through the toys that they use. And I think in the same way that a father, in my case, or a mother wants to be next to their children as they have their first experiences on a bicycle or cooking or drawing, they also want to be next to their children when they start learning how to program with Cubetto. And that's what the stories are all about, allowing parents a way to connect with their children and bring different context within computer programming so they can start having a cross-curricular experience.
Now, my early observation is that you've made it possible for kids anywhere in the world and be accessible in environments where connectivity and additional technology is either inaccessible or difficult to get, and actually empower and educate kids. Where they're in locations where there is no Wi-Fi, there is no Bluetooth. I mean, do you ever take a step back to just soak that up? Because it's an incredible feat, isn't it?
It is, and we've also seen other companies trying to copy what we did. Took them a while. Maybe they don't do it as well. But in terms of, we think of impact as a sort of vector, which actually, to answer your question in a roundabout way, is how we look at our work, right? If we want to impact, it's about efficiency. It's about creative efficiency. As a company, we want to have the biggest possible impact on the life of a human. When you can alter a vector close to its point of origin, the impact over time and the delta that vector creates on the graph becomes really, really big. So over 20 years, a child that has learned to think in a different way because of a product earlier on in his life is huge. That's a huge impact for the amount of effort that we put into designing this product. And the same goes for the industry, who's, after the awards that we won, after the impact that we've had, has started copying what we did as a product. That means that we've also altered the trajectory of an entire industry. That's impact. That's, as a small company, what we've achieved in that sense is pretty big. It's very motivating. It's very motivating to keep working on products that have that potential. Of course, you need to keep working at it. And yeah, the fact that it's screenless, the fact that it can go anywhere in the world, also the fact that there's no text or language involved, means that the product is accessible in exactly the same way anywhere you go. I go to classrooms in Bourbon, Japan, or rural China, or Germany and South America and the United States. They all access this technology and this product in exactly the same way. This is real inclusion. And it kind of mirrors the true world of computer programming and coding, where people from around the world kind of speak the same language, which is either PHP or Java or C++, whatever it may be, and they can all work on the same problems and on the same projects together, irrespective of their cultural background or languages. So it's a good feeling.
I think I already know the answer to this because of how you've spoken about you being in classrooms all over the world. But I've got to ask, how has it been received by educators and the education industry all over the world?
Well, actually, that's our biggest market. And it was really interesting because at the beginning of this project's life cycle, before we launched in 2016, we sold this as a DIY product. You could assemble your own Cubetto playset. And we offered two versions, a version that you could assemble yourself as a DIY kit and a version that didn't. And for every person that bought a DIY version of the Cubetto playset that could build it themselves, we had 100 people that just wanted the experience of the built product already. And those were educators, because their job is to educate, is not to build DIY projects. So it was actually the education world that pushed us to understand that the finished article, the technology represented by the finished article is what was of real value. And all around the world, one of the things that's been interesting to see is that in 2013, when we opened the company, there was only really one country that had made significant changes to their national curriculum to introduce computer programming in early years, and that was the United Kingdom. And this was a change spearheaded by a professor called Miles Berry. That's his name. He's a professor at Roehampton University and the head of computing at schools. And going back to why it was difficult to raise money is because nobody around the world was talking about programming. What we've noticed in the 4 years that we've been in business actually is that every single one of the 100 countries that we sell our product in now has either already introduced a computing curriculum for early years or has plans to do so in the future. Like Korea, for example, will start this year, 2018. Japan is probably going to start in a couple of years. They're trailing behind. The US has already made big moves. Germany is making a big deal about introducing computing in their classrooms. Italy as well. So there's been this global awakening to the fact that we need to teach our children different things. We can't teach them the same things that we were teaching them 100 years ago and expect them to be functional and productive and creative adults in the digital world that we live in. And everybody's just realizing that. And we've just been growing on this wave. And we were just lucky to be there at the right point, at the right place at the right time to provide the solution for this specific age group. So there's also some luck involved in what we've done and what we're doing.
So you have customers in over 100 different countries now. So for anyone listening, can you remind them of your website details? Also, along with any additional information that you think would be useful about the products and a ballpark price, and how much it will cost to start teaching kids to code in classrooms?
Yeah, sure. So the website is www.primotoys.com, but you can also purchase a product on Amazon. We sell in different Amazon stores around the world, from the US to Europe to Australia to Japan to Korea. So it's widely accessible as a product. The core unit costs $225, and you get the robot, you get 16 blocks, you get a map, you get the actual programming unit, and you get about over 100 hours of play value out of it. And we've got use cases for that. And there's additional maps, and there's also a resource center online with play suggestions and activities and mazes to complete. So when you spread that initial investment over the first 3 years of your child's coding education, that's actually a pretty good return. And it's so easy. You don't need there's almost no learning curve, because you can just turn it on, and if a 3-year-old can get it, so can a parent. And we also have a really beautifully illustrated instruction book that makes it extremely easy to just turn the playset on and really start programming the robot. But it's super intuitive. And, I think a lot of parents and a lot of teachers out there are frightened by the idea of introducing a subject that they don't understand. And so actually one of the reasons for our success has been that we made it accessible to them as well. That's key to making something that's impactful, because at the end of the day, it's parents and teachers who need to facilitate these experiences.
Well, I think one of the most dangerous things that we can say now is the dreaded words, "we've always done it this way." And I think now more than ever, it's so important to teach different things and encourage kids to think in a different way. And they're the skills they're going to need to thrive in a digital world. And I love the way that you're doing this, but without a screen, and enabling kids to do it in areas where there is no Bluetooth, there is no Wi-Fi. And that alone is inspirational. So a big thank you for taking the time to come on and share that story today.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope some people find it interesting as well.
I really do think it's an inspirational story, and easy to see why they enjoyed phenomenal success over on Kickstarter. Because teaching children how to code, but offering a unique approach that teaches this important skill to the youngest ever age group in history without involving screen time is simply breathtaking. And I don't say that lightly, but for me it's because they've made it possible for kids anywhere in the world to not only learn, but to be accessible in environments where connectivity and additional technology is typically either inaccessible or difficult to get. Now, I know we've got listeners in 160 different countries to this show, and not all of those countries are going to have access to all the cutting-edge technology and high-speed internet. I think that's something that people forget. And that's just one of the many reasons why what they're doing at Primo Toys is so fantastic. And also, of course, parents should embrace the fact that Cubetto offers girls and boys all over the world the opportunity to learn about these basic building blocks of coding and engineering, but without being glued to a computer screen. These are just my thoughts though. Please share your opinion on today's or any of the episodes that we've recorded recently by emailing me at techblogwriter@outlook.com or Twitter, of course, at Neil C. Hughes. And remember, if you're visiting my website, techblogwriter.co.uk/podcast from a desktop PC or a laptop, you'll find a little widget there where you can leave me your very own virtual voicemail message. I did receive an anonymous one yesterday from a gentleman just saying the number 2. I'm not sure what it was all about, but I do thank you anyway. But I'm afraid it's time for me to prepare for next week's shows over at Las Vegas at the CES event. So I'm going to go off and do my prep work, but I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. So thanks for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.